Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I think we're live.
awesome.
Beautiful. I'll give it like a 15-second buffer and then we'll go.
Okay.
All
Good
right,
luck.
let me show
No.
you. So right before we got going, I was getting tired, so I went outside, sat in the grass, did some
Okay.
qigong, and beat on my belly a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, folks. Welcome here to another episode of the Personal Development Without the Fluff podcast. And I am super excited to have this beautiful woman here with me today. Her name is Sarah Cruze. I will let her introduce herself in a second. I just want to tell you how I know Sarah. I met Sarah back in November 2019, pre-corona,
Yeah.
and and Sarah's actually a mentor of mine inside of the educational community that I'm in. Elon and I call it a mystery school or a school of energetics. I don't really know what to call Luminous, but that's where I met Sarah, and she's been part of that community for a number of years, right? I believe
Mhm.
quite a bit of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen her do wonderful, incredible, hard to believe science fiction type stuff things in that room. And she's just a talented human being, also a musician, and just an incredible healer. And probably by taking a quick glance at her and just like feeling into her energy, you could just see that she's just a gorgeous human being walking the earth. So the reason I invited her to be here, although I was kind of feeling called to it prior to this, during our last module, she gave some really impassioned, they're not speeches because she's not like sitting in front of us directing anybody, but just shared very authentically about what it's like to be a black person in America to pretty much a room of white people, and probably the most eloquent way I've ever heard anybody share about racism and inequality, full stop. So
Mhm.
just very, very moving. I mean, my wife and I were sitting there like holding hands while Sarah is talking because the depth of the wisdom that she was bringing through was just really, really beautiful, and hits some strings that are sometimes very difficult to be hit. So I wanted to bring her on here. I'm sure we'll talk about that. We'll see in what ways we bring that through. But Sarah, welcome to the show, and anything else you want to say about yourself, I'm sure they're happy to hear it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here, Guy. And yeah, as you were talking, I was just feeling, I got some goosebumps and um, just feeling the like the potency of this time and um, just how beautiful it is to have a voice. I think a part of my journey, maybe we'll get into it, is just discovering what a voice is, what a voice is for, and being able to convey truth with love.
Mm.
I think is something that I really have worked hard to be in relationship with. um, yeah, and yeah, I've been a part. I've been learning about the subtle nature of life for a long time. My first love was sound. I discovered the just the magnificence of a pure tone, and how that can change, how it changed my whole reality.
Mm.
And so that's kind of the ground. Um, yeah, and going into the listening. Um, Listening is the ground of all things in my experience with life and the relationship that we have together, right? Um, yeah, I don't know what to say. I
Whatever
um,
comes through is fine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love supporting people. I love being supported. Um, yeah.
So I'm curious, how did you end up finding the subtle energetic space? Was it through Luminous, or was that already part of a practice of yours prior to?
Um, I mean, it's something that feel like I knew when I was a child. Like you can feel things, and I remember being able to see and even taste patterns.
Hmm.
Like there was something about like, okay, that's like you would. There's an energy. It has a familiar feeling. Um, there's some kind of image, internal mind image that happens, and even sometimes a taste. And so I would get used to noticing. Um, and usually at first it was kind of like things that were uncomfortable, like in my family patterns, and be like, oh, there's that thing again, or this is in the room. And really being interested in the nature of patterns, and and learning that it's over time it's really hard to change patterns once they're started.
Mm.
And so it's really important to, like find attunement before we create, because then the patterns that we create will have that attunement. We won't have to spend energy trying to recourse, repattern. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so you had mentioned your love for music.
Hmm.
Did that also start really early on? Because obviously music is very mathematical, pattern driven, almost hypnotic in nature. That was there
Yeah.
pretty early on. Yeah.
It was, and that it was, there was an abrupt kind of like pause. I didn't, I feel like I was a very creative young child, and then things just kind of got, when life gets too overwhelming, systems shut down in order to support the survival mechanism. And so I went traveled a long time through life without having access to my creativity, my voice,
Mhm.
music. And not until I graduated from undergrad, and I decided to like explore that. I think I was 24 when I first kind of put myself out there in public and shared a poem, like at an open mic. um, but I played the violin as a child, like 4 years
Nice.
old until I was 12. And so that was a nice foundation that I could later return to, that feeling, if nothing else.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
played the violin for a few years too. At a very young age, I remember hot cross buns and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But it never amounted to much. I'll be super honest here. Like creative outlets, I love creative outlets, but publicly sharing any of those, even singing, is
Uh-huh.
a massive fear of mine. To
Uh-huh.
to the point, to the tune of where I had mentioned to my wife that I would want to sing in public, but I'm really scared of it. Like public speaking, I can do, but public singing, it shakes me to my core. So
Mhm.
she had bought me 5 singing lessons on Father's Day, not realizing that I wasn't just kidding a little bit. Like I didn't even want to sing in front of a music teacher, like that kind of fear. So
Uh-huh.
I was trying to make every excuse in the book to get myself out of it. And when she just saw like the panic-stricken nature of the gift, I did do it, and I actually enjoyed it immensely. I ended up finding, or she ended up finding a woman that sings with Jason Mraz
Mhm.
as a music teacher, as a voice coach, and I did a bunch of that. And then she invited me to come sing over Christmas at a mall, and that was a hard no for me. So I haven't stretched my legs on that one yet.
Okay.
But maybe you can convince me otherwise.
Yeah, it can be so much fun. But I believe me, I know that fear. That's
Yeah.
real. It's real. Yeah, and you can gently step in and out of it whenever you want to. It's
Yeah.
like fear.
Let's talk a little bit about your background before we talk about more current events. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were born in Texas. Is that true?
My dad was born in Texas.
I
I
was
was
born in
born
Texas.
in Torrance, California.
Okay.
That's,
I
yeah.
remember Texas in there. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad
Yeah.
was born in Texas, born and raised.
And you've been in California your whole life? Never
I,
wandered?
I have. I am a California girl.
You,
Yeah,
you guys don't leave. That's what I found with Californians. I get why. It's pretty awesome out here.
it's pretty awesome. I've always lived pretty much by the coast. I live 2 blocks from the ocean right now, and it's just I feel like it's just it it's my equilibrium. It's my, yeah, my resonance.
I, I
Uh-huh.
totally agree with that. Um, so tell me a little bit more about the energetic space. Obviously, I get the pattern, but like what brought you to what I can. I mean, it's funny because the energetic space is as ancient as any spiritual practice, and yet in today's world, it seems like the most cutting edge of technologies. We describe our company as blending neuroscience, psychology, and ancient energetics in
Mhm.
interesting ways because yeah, I don't know. Like this feels more cutting edge than anything else. Yet I know it's been around for the longest period of time. So what path led you to wanting to be proficient at this?
Yeah, thank you. I think part of it is my nature. Um, Part of it is an inheritance. Um, and I have an extreme curiosity and a reverence for just subtle nature. Like I shared when I discovered sound. When I was a young child, I remember feeling like I'm just supposed to be able to make sound, and people are supposed to get all the like talking was something that was so weird to me. I didn't know. I didn't know how to communicate for a long time. um, and there's something about um, being able to communicate um, in different ways than we're used to. I'm also a performing artist, and like emoting is such an exquisite expression of like we can relay and convey and attune and um, uh, invite, right? Just from experiencing emotion and letting it out, just like the essence of a flower,
Mm.
right? And then people can get information that way. And so I've always been very curious of that. I discovered sound, I discovered patterns, and it just seemed like this beautiful world that the more I gave it my attention, the more I learned more about myself, where I come from, the patterns of relationship in my family. I've done an incredible amount of healing by paying attention and noticing and being able to track this just the subtle things that are always going on that we're not taught. Like I think we should be taught this in preschool, right? Like this is just our nature. It's not
Oh,
extraordinary, you know. And I think like science, right, these days, and it, the Western mind is conditioned to having to know that something exists before it acknowledges that something could possibly exist. And so, it's just kind of like the rate of science, right? The rate that science can track and prove kind of conditions the amount of growth or how much this beautiful sensitivity that is actually a part of our human nature. It's just like the part of the exquisite being that we are. It's who we are. It's undeniable. Um, the way that it can, the rate that it can actually make its way into, like maybe say our medical systems, right, is only at the rate that science can support it, which I used to be very angry at. I used
yeah.
to be frustrated at, but um, yeah, so sound, and then I found luminous, and I remember having this massage. I got this massage from a woman who had just graduated, and I was like, "How are you inside of my body? Like, what happened? How did you do that?" Like,
Yeah.
just making the sounds that, like, my sound, and I
Mm.
had never experienced that level of being met. And and I was like, "Wait, what's this school?" And I went and Googled it, and it was like it. It had not yet become Luminous Awareness Institute. It was Luminous Body, and the website was kind of weird, and I couldn't have access. I remember seeing Mark Tanaka. I'm like, I know that guy. He teaches for this school, and then, it was like years passed, and then life just brought me back and gave me a very grand and welcoming entrance into the school. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I hadn't. It's funny, we live in this kind of world where most of us are trying to achieve something, make something happen, putting a lot of effort towards it. And then we have certain examples in society of people who have efforted a lot and achieved what would seem quite a bit by the current standards of society. Nonetheless, now that I look at a lot of those people who are achieving by current standards, it's not their health that's led them to achievement. It's their like putting this in big quotes, sickness that has led them to their health, or what we're calling distortions have led them to
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Um, so I remember my first experience with Andrew,
Mm-hmm.
which almost didn't happen, and it was very similar. It was like he was in my body,
Mm-hmm.
directly expressing out loud what I was feeling internally, which seemed completely impossible at the time.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the effort piece because if I had started that work I believe if I'd started that kind of work wanting to get those powers, right? They're not really powers, it's just human nature that we're not aware of,
Hmm.
um, or most people are not aware of. I don't know that I would have gotten to a place where I could even track somebody's system the way that I could today and feel what they're feeling. So it's kind of this irony of like the more that we want it or try to effort towards, it seems actually like the less health there is in terms of actually achieving that thing or gaining that thing, gaining that quality maybe is
Uh-huh.
a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So I find that fascinating, and I agree with you 100% on like science, right? It's like if it can't be measured and it can't be tested and it can't be proved and then proven again, it's like outside the realm of possibility. But I'm currently obsessed with the metaphor of mirrors and how they reflect light and how the like reality is really this perfect reflection mirror of what's within us. But it's funny because we look at a mirror and here we are with this like physical body that we're so accustomed to, and yet what we're looking at is a metaphysical shape of like our own creation, right? Of our own conditioning is what we're seeing in the mirror. We're not even seeing our true selves.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm always fascinated how people get to this path because, like you mentioned, I remember being a child, and I don't know why every time I think about being a child, I think about being in overalls. I don't know what that's about. I'm always in blue
You're
overalls when I have
completely
memories.
cute.
Yeah. I remember being like 3 years old. This will be super Jewish what I'm about to say, but we're sitting around and like having Passover dinner, and I remember specifically at that time I would feel this like resonance that would enter the top of my spine and shoot out the back, and it would kind of like shake my body in a really pleasurable way, almost like an ecstatic experience. And I remember over the years here and there would hit, and I would always come back to this memory. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember feeling that a lot when I was a kid, and I would notice that I would feel that energy in like a high vibe, whatever current vernacular, high vibe locations. And then when there was low vibration, I'm like, I can't feel it. But it is fascinating, like you said, that out of all the things that could be part of our educational system, seems to be almost like systematically withheld, almost like financial education or really anything that actually makes a difference for the quality of people's lives is not taught, while we spend a lot of time on things that really don't make that big of a difference for us.
Yeah, I know I do. So yeah, I love everything that you said. And um, there's a couple things that lightened. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, see what
Um,
comes through.
yeah, we'll see what comes through. But so like I teach mindfulness in schools. I work for an organization called Mission B, and and when I first found the organization, I was like, oh, I get to give these tools to these kids that, like, I needed these tools when I was a kid, and I get to
Right.
share these, right? Like, we get to meditate and we get to do all these things, and I came to this place where I was like, oh God, I feel like I'm giving these kids tools on how to survive prison longer and better because of the educational system and because of the rigid structures that were created. And when we talk about, I mentioned patterns before, right? When you have a pattern that started, it's hard to shift the pattern. Um, and like our educational systems came out of, a lot of it came out of like World War II, and like some of these rigid structures come out of trauma.
Yeah.
Right? When we're traumatized and we create something, the structures that we create are inherently focused on keeping us from experiencing the thing, and so there's a rigid structure in there that is that doesn't have the element of listening in it. It's not listening anymore because it's said I'm going to be here to help create this safety or feed this certain thing, and that's all I'm doing. It's the blinders, right?
Hmm.
And I'm really excited about how our educational system is learning to listen. And there's this funny thing. I live in Santa Cruz, and I used to work at this school called the Yes School for Recovery. It was really amazing. And some of the kids, they were high school kids that were out of a recovery center. So they were
Wow.
addicted to something, and they came to the school. And um, I don't have a teaching credential, and I'm sure they'll be fine. We'll get them in trouble. But like I was I was a sound healing student, and I had worked in continuation schools before trying to help people. And I feel like when a structure gets to like its edge, it's like we don't know what to do with these kids. If you can help them, sure, whatever you can do to help these kids, right? Like,
Right.
I don't care if you have a degree, I don't care if you crawled out from under a bridge. If you can help these kids, you can do whatever you want. So I was able to just do whatever I want with these kids, right?
Wow.
Fortunately, I'm a trustworthy human being, and they could, that's why they hired me. But I feel like a lot of our systems are reaching that threshold
Yeah.
where they're like, shit, like, we don't know what else to do. Fine, if you can help us. Well, you said you can say energy if you want, right? You can say meditation if you want. I don't care if you can help these kids, right? Yeah, and so I'm really excited about that, and about how um, things are really challenging, and they're hurting a lot all over the place. But these rigid structures are figuring out that they can't maintain, and they're starting to wibble and wobble, and more resource, more information, more soul, right, can come into all these places. Yeah.
I think my computer's doing a little funny thing.
Okay, yeah, I was like, this we are slowed down. What happened right now? Okay.
Let me see.
Okay,
Oh
great.
no.
Okay.
Oh,
Like,
we're
this is
slowing it down
Walter
so much right
Miller.
now. Here we go. Good.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
good. Sorry
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
out of my hands. This is why we do. Okay. I think it's more of the connection to my computer.
Okay.
Okay, love it. Okay, I think I'm back.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I like to think of things in like micro macro, right? Individually, it's always tough to let go of structures. Like we build rigid structures, whether they work, whether the life shows us that those things are working or not. We seem to be nearly incapable of letting structure go. We're
Yeah,
too
it's hard.
too afraid to surrender to what's so, to go back to a space of the unknown, to just see like what other structures exist, and then once in a while maybe we do that, find some new structures, get really excited about that, start building on top of those, find that some things work, some things don't, and then again we get scared to on structure. I when this whole thing kicked off, this global event, I was really excited for it. I not for the some of the darker parts of it, obviously, but it felt like something that was needed, like a, again, terrible word to use here, and I don't mean terrible word. I was going to say cleansing, but I don't mean like a human cleansing. I just mean like a very necessary, right? As someone who's Jewish, right? Like, oh, terrible word to use, but I mean more in the
It's a good
spiritual sense. Yeah, like, again, like we have pushed these structures to such a degree. I think for most mindful people, they would say it seems to me like we've already jumped off the cliff. Now we're trying to figure out if we can build a plane on the way down fast enough so that we can
Yeah,
glide right before we
yeah,
like hit the ground, and that's kind of the game that we're playing. And can that work? Maybe, but is that a dangerous game to be playing? Probably. And that it is probably a really good thing that the globe is taking a pause to reconsider some of the other things. I'm actually curious because you had mentioned like the Rockefeller educational system that I think has been in place since like 1903, if I
hmm,
remember my history somewhat correctly. But
yeah.
are you seeing changes in the educational system? Is Hart coming back?
Yeah. You said changes are. Can you say that one more time?
Are you seeing changes in the educational system? Is the heart coming back? Because on the surface, at least what's reported is like, teachers getting paid less than ever. It seems like there's more difficulty, certainly in the public school system.
Yeah,
Um, like I'm not inclined to send my son to the public school system.
yeah,
It doesn't feel like I picked up my worst habits there, not my best ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like this funny world that we live in. Like, everything is happening. It's all happening simultaneously, right? Like teachers are getting paid less, and also, um, like I was contracted to teach in Wyoming. I got a contract to teach a whole school, even like the janitors, um, like mindfulness. They thought it was a good way to spend their budget, right? The whole school got it. So that's existing as well, right? All of these things. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, and like, right, in healing, like, Guy and I, like, we've been in healing, scenarios together, and a lot of times when change is happening too fast, those rigid structures begin to lock
Push
down
back.
even harder, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then there's kind of like this energetic the energy is trying to move, the structure is locking down, it can be very uncomfortable. But I slowing down, right? When we can slow down and realize that there's more possibilities here than we know. Um, Sometimes it can support those rigid structures in relaxing.
Mm.
Um, and, um, and slowing down is just the my favorite thing to do. I'll slow down forever. Um, um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then in that space, there can be some kind of, because everything is a relationship.
Yes.
Everything's a relationship. When we slow down, it's easier to notice what's happening inside of this relationship and respond more authentically. And I think that's happening in the micro, macro levels, right? All of these, the new growth, right, is responding to the old structures.
Sure.
The old structures are learning, either they're just completely collapsing or they're learning to respond. Yeah. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I think death plays an important role here too. There's the old Charlie Chaplin movie. I think it's called The Dictator, and he gives this really impassioned speech at the end. There's a few musicians that have been plugging the that speech into their music as of late, like a few choice tracks that I absolutely think are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's he basically gets put in the position of a dictator, and then instead of like taking power, he like speaks to the people and basically tells them that he has no right to take this power, and that they need to take the power back, and that there's like machine men with machine minds and machine hearts, and that they're not cattle. Anyway, I love it. Like it one day, I have a huge goal to just memorize that speech from front to back and like do it somewhere because it's like this like 4 minute. It makes me like bawl my eyes out every time I hear it because it's like a cry to freedom,
I
basically.
love it. I'm like,
And you know,
let's whisper that to the governmental chairs.
yeah, I,
um,
I think those people will be like, so we can take more power.
yeah, I know. That'd be a great way to get to kind of cross that threshold of being uncomfortable and sharing your voice in public.
Maybe we should bring back the soapbox. It might,
Yeah, so
it might be
I'll be
time.
able to get you off once
Yeah,
you.
that's it. Well, that's more taking power. I was just rewatching Hamilton because they have it on Disney
Yeah,
Plus
I
now, which
heard.
is
Yeah.
incredible. But there's some really beautiful things they do in the soapboxes there. Um, yeah, so I like that too. I've never found much value in opposition. Um, I think Mother Teresa said, if you invite me to like an anti-war rally, I won't come, right? But
Yeah.
pro-peace, I'm there.
Yeah.
And I see, and again, I think like now that we're in Luminous, I what I fundamentally am starting to see is that everyone's just trying to do the same thing. Well, the underlying thing for humanity is everyone's seeking safety. How we approach that based on how our system is set up, our life experiences, our distortions. So it's like, the police officers in the streets that might be violent, that's still their version of safety. The protesters, that's still a version of their safety. Like me sitting at home, to kind of like pivot towards the topic of racism a little bit here, I didn't quite know how to interact with that. I'm not well studied in the area. I certainly am not blind to it. But I can't say I've read the books or know enough about the topic or the history of it to eloquently give you a point of view or say, here's something I think that could be done about that, other than showing my support for it, which again, not to be too judgmental here, but sometimes feels like empty words by a lot of people who, our culture knows what's going on. So it's like, I'm glad for the time now that we had, because I don't think if coronavirus had hit, all this would have gotten the attention that it has. But for me, it was like the best way I can serve it is like, let me do my own practice. I truly believe that we want to change a collective. We get to transform the individual.
Hmm.
It's just what's so. I often even cite science on this one. Is this is already a scientific fact that they know that if you have like a lab in one area of the world, let's say who's like synthesizing a protein, and there's 10 other labs on the planet trying to synthesize that same protein. The moment one lab figures it out,
Hmm.
within a very short period of time, they all do,
Hmm.
not because they exchange information, because there's something in the field, like a piece of information is remembered and becomes more bioavailable, if you want to call it that. And
Yeah.
this is true in, like, Roger Bannister running 4 Minute Mile and all these other examples that we have. So for me, it's like, okay, well, if I set that groove, I do that energy work,
Hmm.
whatever my work is becomes more available for everybody. So that felt like the best way that I can serve. When I heard you share about it, and I definitely don't mean to put you on the spot as a person who has the answer.
Hmm.
I just thought you shared it from such a balanced place,
Hmm.
even though there's anger there and sadness there.
Hmm.
And I don't want to try to recreate what you said, but certainly, and I would love to, even if anything has shifted since you shared that, like anything you want to share
Yeah.
about that topic right now, I would absolutely love to hear about it.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah. Um, I think I'll start by just sharing. So I'm a biracial human. There's probably more streams in there as well, more than two, possibly. But my mother is Scotch Irish, white lady. No, she's a teacher and grew up in Goleta, California, which is like one of the little most protected little gems, the California coast. And my dad is a black man from Texas that grew up. He's 70 right now, and he grew up right in the 50s. Um,
Mm,
with extreme racism. Like I heard
mm,
that's like most of what I know about my dad's childhood is very painful, and it's taken him a long time to feel safe, you know, with white men, which is makes a whole lot of sense. I didn't understand it when I was younger,
mm,
but it makes a whole lot of sense because of the way that he has been treated in his life. And it was a good directional choice to make to just stay away, right? Um, and so I feel like inherently in my blood, in my bones, I understand my father's experience, right? I think they say trauma lasts like 12 generations or something. And so I understood these things growing up. My parents got divorced when I was 8. And just about that time, my mom got a job at one of the wealthiest public schools in Santa Monica, California. And there might have been like 4 black kids at the school,
yeah.
right? And I have this memory of like going to visit a friend's house, and I was like, oh my God, like the bathroom in their master bedroom was as big as my house. Like my mom raised my brother and I have one brother on $17,000 a year in Santa Monica, and she was too proud to get help from the county. So we were just really poor in a very rich world, and it created this very uncomfortable and challenging experience of life where I lived in a place that I couldn't engage, right? Which is probably a lot what my father felt like too. He lived in a world that he couldn't engage. And so I grew up with my mom, who's, a precious um, white woman with a good heart who also grew up with a lot of trauma and had a fragile nervous system. And so I had to learn how to communicate with my mom, this fragile nervous system, this
Mm,
white woman, in order to have the connection that I needed. And I had a lot of anger and I had a lot of confusion about who I was growing up, and it would come out in different ways. And so I think one thing that I'm reaping the benefits of right now in my life is this ability, I think, to communicate through the chasm, of disconnect. Um, like everything is relational, and so it's just I have a particular orientation inside of this relationship where I have a white mother. In a lot of ways, I'm a white woman because I grew up with my mother's nervous system. I grew up with her faith,
mm,
right, orienting towards her face. And I've had a lot of emotional fragility in my own life because I learned from her nervous system. And I also have a black father who, like, just fucking, like, just kept walking through an incredible,
Mm.
like, like just kept walking, right? Life is coming at you and you just keep walking. And so there's this incredible resilience, this incredible enduring factor um, that that Black people just have. It's fucking beautiful. The soul that just continues, right, regardless of what's happening. My father, he one of the things that I got from him, one of his, like, I didn't grow up with him in my life every day. A miraculous thing has happened, and my parents are back together after 28 years.
Well,
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is just, when you engage healing, everything heals. Your family begins to heal everything,
sure.
right? Um,
Wow. Mm.
yes, I'm learning. I'm learning who I am in this conversation. To me, it's a conversation, and there's lots of people. Resma, I forget his last name, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands. Rhonda McGee. These are African American authors who are talking about, right. It's in our bodies. It's in our bodies, right? We have a body. It's in our bodies, and that's how we're going to heal, is if we allow ourselves to feel it, notice it, give it what it needs, talk about it, and move through. Um,
Can we
and
pause right there for just a quick second?
yeah,
So that idea I think is really relevant and important. I've written on this many times that it's like when global events occur, like I remember when 9/11 occurred, that happened in New York, but rippled throughout the world, right?
mm,
Coronavirus is unique because it is the entire world. It wasn't a place that got rippled out. But here and there, even in our lifetimes, those kind of events are sparse, but we can find those events throughout history, um, and whether or not that event happened in a particular location to a particular group of people, I think it's often missed that it lives in like the human psyche, the human collective body, and that for whatever reason we have never elected um, people into power that have been able to walk us through what I believe could happen is like a systemic healing. Right, we have Gandhi, we have Martin Luther King, people who did do that to an effect, but were not given the stage to do that. They were like the people trying to create a stage to have that conversation, and that has always seemed missed to me because white people might feel like, and again, I'm not talking in the physical sense of the word, have been affected by it in the way that black people have, yet the effect, like you said, it lives in our consciousness,
yeah,
it lives in our human bodies, and I hope this century does become the century of energy, not for just for free energy and Tesla's type of technologies and stuff like that, but like really like recounting energy, reclaiming energy as our birthright and our
yeah,
need to understand it,
hmm,
and work with it because of things like this.
yeah, beautiful. And like, there's enough, like, there could be enough resource, emotional resource on Earth for those of us who have not been able to actually feel the pain that is being enacted every day and recreated every day, to actually feel that. I love what you said. One day, I believe it's true, like, we'll come to this humble knee together and
Mm,
really acknowledge the tragedy that this country is and the facade that it has been pretending, like, playing out. um there are some things that, let me see, I get excited and then I
totally.
forget. That happens
I
sometimes.
mean, whether you were counted or not, and if you can, that's fine. Like,
Okay.
okay, no, yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
tell me.
Well, yeah, I think it had to do with like the protective mechanisms, right? Like, there's something about coronavirus where we can see that it affects everybody. We can see that everybody's affected. It doesn't matter what your race is, right? Although it is like African Americans and Black people actually are, like, it targets them a little bit more. And I think a lot of um, just the impact of racial injustice and that on immunity and on all of these things. There's a whole conversation there.
Sure.
But in the United States of America, we have like white people, people white bodies have had the luxury of walking around thinking that racism doesn't affect them, that it's not a problem that they have to deal with, that it's a black person problem. Even if it does exist, it's for them, you know. And we should and those and I've been having a really hard time with the word ally these days. It makes me angry and frustrated, um, and I think there's just the way I want to make sure, like, if somebody's using that word, like, what does it mean? What does it mean for you to
Mm.
be an ally? Because like, it's like we're all affected by this. We all have our own work to do. And being an white ally doesn't mean turning to your black people and being like, how can I help you? Being a white ally means looking at yourself and supporting your own white community and
Mm.
processing and figuring out what is going on here that enables, you know, this world to look the way it does,
Yeah.
that enables these habits and practices and ways of being, because there's something that's not right in there, right? That really needs a lot of attention. And there is an incredible amount of trauma in white bodies, um, that can keep them, right, and a disassociation, right, that keeps this trauma active, because there's a dissociated relationship. It's not connected. There's not communication happening. And it seems like now something has opened up with the beautiful kind of, what is it? Orchestration, right? Of this coronavirus happening. Everybody's in their home. Everybody's frustrated, irritated, you know, like things are happening. And then this race thing, um, comes to kind of this pivotal point where people are more vulnerable to feeling. People have slowed down enough that they can actually hear what's happening, and they can actually feel what's going on in their own bodies in response to what they're seeing. And so it seems like there's some kind of communication happening between all of the systems, the white bodies, the black bodies, brown bodies, color, whatever, that there's some kind of communication happening that wasn't available before. Yeah.
Someone had brought it to my attention that it's not a coincidence that coronavirus is at the respiratory fifth chakra, right?
Oh, yeah,
Healing
yeah.
work,
You need
uh, which
put
is
that in there.
interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to convey a realization I had probably like 13 years ago. I don't know that I've done much with it, but like my background is my parents are both from communist Russia and moved to Israel in the late 70s to escape from that regime. And
Mhm.
then they lived in Israel for 13 years. My brother and I were born there, and in 89, call it divine intervention or whatever. I won't tell that story, but we ended up in the States really by luck, and lived here illegally for a number of years because we didn't actually think we were staying.
Wow.
And then by the time, and when it started becoming home, we had to go back and get papers, and we actually weren't sure that they would let us back in, so we actually risked going back home to come back home again.
Hmm.
Um, and I say that because the relationship between Israel and Palestine often reminds me, well, Jewish people
Oh, pause.
and their plight often remind me of the plight of the black people as
Yeah.
well. You
Yeah.
know, like very, very similar storyline there. Genocide and racism and all the rest of it. But I remember when I came over, and at some point I was dating a girl in Harlem, in New York,
I think pause. It paused.
and I remember I would go over her place sometimes later at night, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, because New York, so that's like 5 p.m. everywhere else.
Yeah.
Oh, did I pause?
Yeah, it did. It
Hold
happened.
on.
Your face is paused, but I can kind of hear you.
Pause.
Yeah. Mindful pause.
Mm.
Hmm.
Can you still hear me? Oh, there we go.
I can hear you.
I'll let it. I'll
Your
let it buffer all the way.
your face is
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let it.
okay.
Mindful pause back.
Mindful pause. Let's all take some breaths.
Okay. I think we're officially back.
Okay.
Mindful.
Oh man. Okay. Oh.
It went all the way.
Okay. And we're
Okay.
back.
All the way and back.
All the way
All the way
back.
back. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
So I don't know where I lost it, but
You were
you were
going to your
going.
girlfriend's house late at night in New York.
Yeah, I was in Harlem, and going out at like 10, 11, 12 is not uncommon in New York City. It's like 5 p.m. everywhere else. Um, but I remember I would come back to her place sometimes in Harlem, and I will call myself out on this, was hardcore dressing like a metrosexual at the time. And so it was like not a comfortable environment for me. And I remember sometimes there would be like a large group of men standing outside, and I would feel uncomfortable. I'd either cross the street, or I'd had like a leather strap over here. I would like take it off. I was afraid that that would get like ostracized or something like that. And I remember going upstairs one time, and like heart rate's kind of elevated, and I was like, "Fuck, that was scary." And I thought to myself, "Oh, that's how they feel all the time." Because I was a white person walking into a black neighborhood, and that made me feel uncomfortable. And I realized that black people are always walking out into a white neighborhood, and how uncomfortable that must be with the history of things that
Yeah.
most white people, whether they don't have to really consider it much of the time. Like once in a while, an event happens, it's kind of in your face. Um, but other times you kind of go about your business and it's not really front of mind, but for them it is. And I remember going upstairs and having that really like a really sad feeling in my body, and also feeling helpless to do much about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's not the experience I wanted for me.
Uh-huh.
It's not the experience I want for them,
Mm-hmm.
for any of us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we live in a world where people are living in fear of each other, and that's why I mentioned Israel and Palestine, because it's a very much a similar story over there of people living in fear of each other without even really knowing why. Like the history is
Yeah.
so distorted at this point in time. But I have always believed you take like a generation of kids, you play soccer together, and before you know it, nobody gives a shit who what
Yeah.
we call what anymore.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm wondering like from your perspective, very balanced point of view, like what are I hate to use this word, but like practical things that you would like to see. Yeah, just how do white people approach something like this? Because like you said, an ally, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to reach out to a black community. That's just not my gift to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but I would like to support the cause, obviously, in some way. I'm sure a lot of people would, but they're just like, what do I do? So what is it that we could be doing?
Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, that's a very broad question. I think,
I know it is. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, it's great. I think that just fundamentally remembering that everything is a relationship. And I think that white people, even though they have been in a relationship with racism, don't know it. There's a lot of subconscious beliefs and actions and just ways of perceiving the world that exist that are not in the conscious realm. And there are, wonderful, amazing books that can be read, but also getting together just in white communities and being honest and processing the fragility in the system, processing the unconscious activity, processing. There's probably lots of pain in there that hasn't been met. I think that's a number one thing that you can do, as a white-bodied person before ever turning towards a black person. Um, I think we're finding now, like it. Before there was like trying to solve this problem. We're trying to find ways to come together before this individual content is not like processed. Like black people need to heal. They need to be in safe places where they can get angry and not be shut down, right? And not and not have their anger be threatening because it's real and it's actually a very healthy response to what's
Yeah.
been happening. That the entirety of what the African American is, right, is constructed with suppression of this anger. Um, and so, I think that's just a great way, just starting in your little pod, in your community, and deconstructing it until you feel comfortable and safe enough. And then again, everything is about relationships. So not entering this conversation to learn something that can help you to be a better person, but entering into this conversation so that you can get to know somebody,
Mm,
that you can discover the love that lives here because you're
mhm,
curious of them and you're inspired by them, and you want to learn how to be a good friend inside of the relationship of friendship. I think that this is what it is. It has to be authentic, or else it's just some other kind of rigid construction that is being orchestrated so that you can feel better about yourself.
yeah.
You know?
Well, I think there's an element of relief in that. It's funny. I got both sides of it. There's an element of relief. Okay, it's like so we can do our own work, right? Because there is all these unconscious biases that we've been conditioned to have through media, through news, and a million other things that unfortunately we've consumed or have
Mhm.
been put out there to be consumed. Um, I get this feeling, like when you sometimes try to help like a disabled person open the door,
Yeah, yeah,
and they don't want to be seen as disabled.
yeah.
So they will. There was a guy at my gym that I never got to know well enough, but he had some kind of muscular degeneration clearly, and couldn't walk in. And every time I would try to hold the door for him, every time he would bark at me, and I would still try to hold the door for him every time. But every time he would bark at me and tell me to like, he'd be like, "Close the door,"
Yeah,
because he doesn't want to be seen for that, right? And no more than I'm sure black people want to be seen for the color of their skin.
and they don't want to be. We're not. I mean, we're not victims. We're not helpless. We're not stupid.
Exactly.
We're not like like we don't need white people to help us to save us. And I think the white savior thing is like
Yes.
that thing is very hurtful. It's very detrimental to the relationship itself, and it helps to kind of solidify the rigid structures of superiority and all of that stuff, that you can't save anybody but yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that's a really important message because I think that when this first started happening, I think there was suddenly this pressure for the white community. It's like, oh shit, we got to do this immense outreach, and black people are seemed confused, and white people seemed confused by the confusion, which added to more confusion. No one quite knew like what's the response that's required here, or wanted or sensitive. Again, it was very confusing. I just got rid of social media immediately because I'm like, this is the most toxic environment I have ever seen, in a very long time over the last few months. Um, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Um, but I think like that gives me solace, right? And I feel like that's what I feel deep inside. It's like the real work for the collective is the individual.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that like nobody knows how to do this right. There's no right way to do it. And people are messing up and saying the wrong thing all the time, every day, everywhere. Like I think the week that George Floyd got, was it the week? Maybe even the month after that, like people were integrating and there's all these Black Lives Matter, like more kind of like focused Black Lives Matter marches and discussions and stuff. And I live in Capitola, which is like white town. It is white town. I stay here because it's beautiful and I can see my other friends, when I can. But I remember going down to the village and like seeing white people like look at me and then make a choice and be like, "Hi, how are you?" When like that never happened before. They never even noticed me, or would even like maybe like turn away or avoid looking at me, was my
Sure.
experience before. And
Huh.
I was so irritated. Oh, now you want to say hi to me? Like that's the first response, right? But then a deeper part of me was like, I actually really want to belong to this community. I
Hmm.
want to live in a place where um, people see me as a valid human being that is like naturally a part of this ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
And so for us to know that, like, even if we, if we do something that is not attuned or not right, that our commitment is to continue with curiosity and humility, right? Our commitment is to continue to try again. And if we need to take a break, we take a break, but just understand that we're all learning here. And underneath all of this is that I think we all just want to be friends and love each other, right? That's like the like underneath all of this mess upon mess. Um, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to say I'm sorry. It's okay to ask questions and be curious.
Yeah, that's a little bit lost in the social media blogosphere of the world today, is the notion of taking responsibility and apologizing, or no, or not even apologizing the way that the social media mob will have you do it, but like people are so afraid to do the wrong thing that they don't do anything anymore.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I actually asked when again when coronavirus hit, I moved out of my home with my wife and my son. We moved in with her family because that just seemed like a better space, and we're still here.
yeah.
Um, so there's an 8-year-old here, and I asked him yesterday. Actually, I said, "Hey, social media is, yeah, of course he knows what that is, but I said, hey, how much do you think that social media reflects the real world? Like what you see online, do you think that that actually reflects your experience of the world?" He's like, "No, absolutely not." And I think there's a fear for the older generation that this younger generation is growing up with that and thinking that that is an accurate reflection. But it's funny, I think they probably do a better job of discerning between the two than
Hmm.
we have,
Uh-huh.
because we may have kind of grown with it in a different way, where it's like I'd be very curious to sit down a group of younger people and really ask them about what they believe in social media. Part of me is like, maybe they get it, maybe they don't. I continuously have a mild fear because I remember my time in school and like the pressure and people teasing you and all that stuff. And I think to myself, well, they go home, they don't even get solace from that when they go home, because it just continues on all these social media channels. Um, I don't really know why I went down this road, but yeah, I think we give that too much credit. We don't give like this interpersonal relationship that you're talking about nearly enough credence. That I think most people are smart enough to understand, or rational enough to understand, that that doesn't is not a good representation of the world. It's a
Yeah. And that's the
very,
history of
yeah,
like,
please.
oh yes, like um of how information, right, is shared and controlled. It's just how things have been. It doesn't mean it's true. Like we watch the news, and just because, I mean, there's some intention behind what information is being shared, right? And the truth is that most people love each other. The truth is that we're all human beings and we all are doing our best, right? The truth is that we all want to live our best life. Like these are the truths, right? And to really prioritize relationship.
Mm,
The truth in my life is the truth inside of my relationships. That's the most truth in my life. And if I can attune to these relationships and clarify them, if I can, right, if I can bring like integrity and harmony into these relationships, that's the best thing that I can do, right? Starting with my internal relationships, right? All that craziness that happens inside here, um, right? And that's like the mindful approach, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you had even mentioned your parents coming together after almost 3 decades. I imagine that that was not on the horizon in terms of something that could have been planned.
Oh, it's like a triple miracle. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And yet, looking back now, you see some threads about how you did some work, how that had an impact on the relations of the family, probably
yeah,
bringing more safety and communication, integrity, responsibility into places where people couldn't do that because of the structures that were in the way. And then you see on like the more macro level of the family, this like amazing event happen where like a relationship can happen again.
yeah.
I imagine it could look something like that.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the only thing that I know. Like I know it because I know it inside of me. I've seen it work. It's true. It's possible. There might be
Mm.
other things that are possible, but like this relational route is really like It's like the best ROI you could ever imagine. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's true. Beautiful.
yeah,
Anything else that you feel called to just express or share about that? I know it's a really different environment than it was at Luminous that created a. I like wish that was recorded. You know, I
yeah.
mentioned that speech from that movie, The Dictator. It had that kind of resonance for me. It was like it was hearing a deep truth from also a place of power, but also a place of hurt.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah,
actually making me emotional now as I tune back into it again a little bit.
yeah. Well, you,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, I think a part of that is like in Luminous, even in Luminous, right? It's it is centered around the white experience. It's centered around privileged white people
yeah,
who are wanting to gain enlightenment, or become more, like have more a deeper relationship with the innate superpowers, right? That we have as human beings that are innately our gifts, right? It doesn't make
yeah.
us special to have them. They're just who we are. It just makes us more who we are.
Mm,
And so a lot of what was coming through being maybe one of the only other colored people. I don't know why that word came up, but like mixed people of color in this iteration. A lot of the other people of color left because they were not happy with the resonant field that was
mm,
organizing towards white fragility, towards white superiority, towards even in this um, school that is intending to help all of humanity. There's blind spots,
sure.
and so a lot of the pain that I was sharing, I think, was of course inherent in all that has come before me, right? Trying to break through and trying to communicate with this archetypal being, right? This archetypal human that gets to tell me if I'm human enough, that gets to tell me if I'm good enough, right? I'm trying to communicate to that and tell it that you are wrong. I am a beautiful being, and there are so many things that you don't know about life. And if you can just relax your mode of achievement, right? Your lens of beauty, of your plateau of like superiority. If you can just lay those down for a moment, there might be something that could make your life so exquisitely beautiful, so pleasurable, right? So worthwhile that you don't need all of these other things anymore.
Mm,
I was also speaking to power structures and right, like even those of us that have, I'm saying those of us because this we're all, this is not just a white problem. Anybody who has power sometimes gets a little power hungry, right? But like
sure.
we all have we're all learning what true power is, right? Outside of this archetypal power over power under dynamic, where you either have it or you don't, there's a third choice. At least a third choice, right? Where we get to like be the agents of this power that flows through us, that we get to honor this life, and especially like the teachings, to any like white oriented communities or organ, if you look around, just everybody's white, and you're teaching things that came from a different continent, right? That didn't come from Europe. You're teaching these teachings. Please, like, acknowledge that, right? Like, acknowledge it with your money. Acknowledge it with where the money goes. Um, there's a there's like a stream of wisdom that's like, hey, I'm here. Like, right, it's like this beautiful fountain that's asking you to drink, but you can't drink if you can't acknowledge that it's here. If you want to co-opt it for yourself or take ownership in some way, you just can't drink it. um, and this country, this United States of America, like the true reality is that it's not like pull yourself up from your own bootstraps and you'll get it. No, it's like you like exercise mass genocide and you enslave people and then you'll get it. That's
Yeah.
the truth. And so, in order to actually reap the, in order to breathe in soul, in order to breathe in the body that is soul, that is incredibly emaciated, right? That's why people get plastic surgery. That's why people get like. That's why we're so attached to this physical reality, because this body of soul is emaciated. It doesn't even know that it exists. That these wounds, like you said, if we could have someone in power, right? I even think having one person in power is just a silly thing. Having a president is just so silly. But like a group of people in power that actually want to process, own, and accept and like metabolize this great wound, right? And then bringing that back to like organizational spiritual communities, that it's important to know that I think, whenever you adapt something that's not your own, inherent to your culture, there's going to be some rigid structure in there,
Sure.
because you're trying to abide by rules that you learned from outside of yourself. And
Mm.
to just notice when those rigid structures, and be open to listening to people when they point to them. It doesn't have to be threatening. It can be life giving and life supporting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember reading Animal Farm in school,
Uh-huh.
which
Uh-huh.
was supposed to be a commentary on communism.
Yeah.
And that really famous line in there is, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yeah.
And it's funny enough, like now, like reflecting back on that book, it was more of a commentary on America than it was a commentary on Russia.
Really?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, it is. American history is interesting,
Yeah.
because it's not written from truth,
Hmm.
not even close to being written from truth.
Hmm.
And I think that's a hard gut check for a lot of people, and I think it's a reality that needs to be dealt with because uh, this country was like an amalgamation of something that had been happening for a very, very long time, and it was like used as the tip of the spear, so to speak, to see those kind of ideals into fruition
Hmm.
and into like a new century and new
Yeah.
centuries for
Yeah.
quite a long time.
Yeah.
Um, and I do think that there's room for a discussion about what kind of society do we want to have moving forward? How do we want to create law? Because I even think about what, again, this is being presented as like this Black Lives Matter movement or like defunding the police. And I'm like, I think if you asked Black people on like the top 100 things that they wish would change, defunding the police would probably be pretty low on the list because there's like from education to uh, lack of educational resources to just lack of healthy food or
Yeah. Well,
all sorts of things that they don't have easy access to. Yeah, that they
yeah.
would want to put in front of all that.
Well, I think that there's just a tremendous amount. There are many things. I think defunding the police is kind of a like. Have you watched the documentary 13th?
I haven't. No, it's on my list for sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I invite you to watch that. It's awesome, and it just derives the, like, police were created to police slaves, right? And
sure,
so,
sure.
and it derives this line to the modern day privatized, like prison systems where,
Yeah,
like, um, I want to say slaves, but like, prisoners are like being garbage men and getting paid $1.25 an hour, or 75 cents an hour or something. So
right.
it's happening. There's a lot of things, yeah,
I need to change.
that need to change, and having like healthy grocery stores in,
Yeah,
prominently Black communities might be, I think, a number one thing to do. Yeah, yeah,
and that's systemic, right? Like if we thought about food in a different way. If there's so many things, because like you said, Black people are being disproportionately affected by coronavirus. But if you actually, again, I won't go into all the science behind this, but like viruses are actually, there's no scientific evidence that viruses cause any sort of pathology. It's always environmental in nature, and then the virus leverages when
yeah,
when the immune system is out of whack. But
yeah,
that's because there's arsenic in the air. That's because there's carcinogens in the air, and that's why you get places like Wuhan and New York City being so affected because the arsenic in the air and CO2 levels are so high that, of course, something that could affect the respiratory system
Hmm.
easily enables itself. But the reality is, I think we know about like scientifically, we know roughly of 13,000 viruses. These viruses are around us
All the
all the
time,
time.
literally.
Bacteria is on us all the time, but they're not affecting us because our immune system has the ability to ward off that effect. And probably you can multiply that 10 million out, right? On how many viruses actually exist. So it's a little bit strange to like put one under
Yeah,
the
on the
microscope and say,
microscope
you're
and
doing
discovered.
this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So I think it's like, we don't live in a very holistic way. And you could say that from psychology to food and how we treat animals and everything in between. And it all seems to have this thread that we're unable to see because the mind just can't see that big. I remember, I don't know why I'm using so many pop culture references today, but so be it. Like you watch V for Vendetta,
Hmm.
and I remember there's like that's like a perfect metaphor for what's happening in today's world, that movie. But there's like a scene where one of the detectives is like asking him whether he believes it's true that the government could have done this to his own people. And he's saying, I went to this place and I had this feeling. He's recounting all these stories and he's basically drawing a thread between, the last 30 years and how they got here. And he goes, and then he discounts, he goes, but it was just a feeling, after they do this really dramatic scene about it. And that's how it feels to me about all this. It's like there's just so much here, but that's what I'm saying. Like it occurs to me that it's overwhelming to take action, and what I want to drive home here again for me is that it really does come back to, if we want to change something, if we don't do our inner work, I don't care. Like if changing the laws will enable more people to have greater benefit, that should absolutely be done. And changing a law does not change the hearts and the minds of the people. It doesn't shift the trauma. You can't just defund the police and say, cool, like problem solved, we signed civil rights, like problem solved, we signed a declaration for them to not be slaves anymore, problem solved. It doesn't solve anything.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Even the reason why, like the reason why slaves were freed was economic. It wasn't because they wanted black people to be equal. It was to save the economy, right? So the reason that choices are made also has an impact in the pattern, right? What plays out afterwards. So yeah, black bodies were not at all um, valued in that choice. It was just a byproduct. The quote unquote liberation was a byproduct of that choice. Um, yeah, and so it's just like looking at when choices are made. Like our country was created by traumatized drunk people. Traumatized drunk men created our country. Like that's just a mess, right? They came from Europe, they were completely traumatized escaping. Everybody was drinking, right? Like they had profound ideas, but they were not connected to their bodies. And so we have this profound idea that is not embodied in the United States of America.
Mm,
And we are getting an opportunity. We have this beautiful opportunity to move towards embodiment, because whatever that idea is of like a free nation, that people can practice whatever religion they want, they can open a business, they can, all of these things. It's gorgeous, it's incredible, it's beautiful. But it's time to move it into these beautiful resonant um, bodies of ours, so that it can actually um, become a reality.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is the great opportunity of this time.
Mhm.
It does feel to me like everything else, we're on this seesaw, and you can either be a puppet on the string right now, being pulled by every story, and or you can find out that we really can design this thing that we call life, uh, to be free and beautiful. And I'm a big fan of this channel that does beautiful channelings on YouTube. His name is Cryon.
Oh,
Definitely
okay.
worth looking into.
Okay.
Profound to say the least, the stuff that he brings through. I mean, challenges not just thought and emotion, but even technology. Talks about like how to bring forward new technology that are, and he says, bring anybody into this room to tell you, like, to challenge what I'm saying, that it's not true. But when this whole thing started, he made a metaphor, and he said this event is a lot like Chernobyl in 1985.
Mm,
He said the energy of it is very similar,
mhm,
because in when Chernobyl happened, and my mom's from Ukraine, so my mom was his family was over there basically. Uh, Basically the way that the government was handling it was through misinformation, which is what Russia always did, right? And so we Americans think about the Iron Curtain and think that they were behind this wall of misinformation they didn't know. But I'm like, America's no better. We just, instead of calling it communism, we call it capitalism here, and we slap a few different bumper stickers on it. We make it look pretty, and we go about our day. But the reality is like the I think that's what's being seen right now is this massive misinformation. So with Chernobyl, all these people were dying and the public was seeing it and the government was reporting nothing was happening. So the people started waking up to that. And I think it was Gorbachev was the president cited that that event was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union because so many people woke up at one time. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that feels so true to me
Yeah.
because it's like you when you make people this confused, as confusing as this time has been, or the last 4 years really have been, and that's why I think maybe at the end we'll all be applauding President Trump because he heralded in this event. Like, and
Too
again,
soon. No,
too soon for that. I get it, but I know that that's a far stretching concept, but I
I
mean, like, hear me
understand what
out.
you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's like the soul level for every human, and the soul, in my opinion, knows what they're coming down here for. If someone takes on that much shit,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. It's
soul
like that
takes on that
last
much.
relationship, right? Like that last partner where you're like, I'm never doing that again. Thank
Well,
you. And I'm out.
yeah, there is this concept, right? Like if there's a soul relationship between two people, one soul's the light, one soul's the dark, and the darkness comes down here and says, "I'm going to do these bad things to you, and I'm going to do them to help you reveal your light. And my request is, when I do that to you, remember that I'm actually light too." But
Hmm.
that's how the relationship works. It's like we come down here to do those things to each other to reveal more light. So it's like I think about him, this like chaos, right? That it looks like on the surface, or like a Hitler or something like that. But and those events, those kind of people, ultimately, and this is coming from a person whose family was decimated in that event. Um, it reveals more light on the planet. It changes things, and so that's what I'm saying. Like maybe way down the road,
We'll be
we'll be
like,
able to.
that was
Yeah,
amazing. I can't
yeah,
believe.
exactly.
Thank you so
Uh,
much for
yeah.
liberating us from our bondage.
Not
Yeah.
not the change we thought we needed, but maybe the change we thought we wanted, but the change we needed
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the end of the day. Yeah.
He's like that mirror where we get to look and be like, ooh,
Oh,
that's what I look like.
yeah.
You
Some
know,
orange on the inside.
yeah. You're like, oh God, I need to work out. I want to eat healthier. I want to love myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big game.
Yeah.
Anything else that you feel like you want to share?
I think maybe one last thing is like it's all a choice, right? We all have a choice on how we respond, right? Like reaction versus responding. And to notice, begin to just notice how your body feels when you have different thoughts, right? Like what if I do this? How does my body feel? What if I do this? How does my body feel? And like the way out is just like a way out, whatever, is learning to navigate towards a more energy, learning to navigate towards greater experiences of love inside of your own bodies. And we get to just do that in every moment, right? In every conversation, in every moment, beginning to notice, am I feeding myself right now with this thought, with this feeling, with this action? Or
Hmm.
am I depleting my energy with this thought, this feeling, or this action? Right? There's a beautiful golden compass inside of all of us, right? And we get to kind of like navigate when we learn to listen and allow ourselves to feel and be honest about how we're being impacted in the moment. Yeah, we have the power. It's like we got the power.
Really.
Yeah,
Yeah, the profundity of like the divine intelligence that's actually like this close all the time,
yeah.
but that most people have not been given the opportunity to sit in and rest into.
Hmm.
Both saddens me and excites me at the same time.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
I love having you here. I know we could have this one conversation
For a long
for
time.
12 days straight.
Yeah,
Yeah, so maybe we'll have you jump back on here again at a different time, and
I'd love to.
we'll
Yeah.
see how the world turns a little bit, and I'm sure there'll be more to talk about. But
Thanks for having
Sarah,
me. Yeah. Thank you
I
so
just want
much.
to tell you, yeah, I love you.
Yeah.
There's a kindness that exudes out of you that is a rare commodity in our planet.
Mm,
I think you're a voice that I hope gets to be heard more.
mm,
And
yeah.
lastly, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to just tell people how they can find your music, find you, if they want to maybe even reach out to do some healing work with you. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. I have, yeah. And I just want to say, um, I'm just really grateful to be here with you and to have a voice that feels like exciting to share, and that's just a
Mm,
big deal. And I'm really grateful for that. Yeah,
real pleasure.
yeah. Thank you. And yeah, you can find me. I have a website, posturesofgrace.com, POSTURES with an S of grace.com is my healing website. And yeah, I'm open. My shop is open. Virtual sessions are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can catch me there. And also, I have a band named Yaya's Kitchen, and our website is yayas.kitchen. And you can stream us on any of your favorite streamable platform. We came out with an EP almost, gosh, it's like a year and a half ago, called Oh Mama, and it's kind of, yeah, it has that in there, like loving up the mama.
Yeah. I'm going to take you up on a healing session soon too.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. I've been excited about that even before this call.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Okay, my dear. I love you so much. Thank you for being here.
To Guy, thank you so much.